I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
The way to do things is do them. Just try every permutation of opportunity. Do them. Don't commit to this definition of yourself any longer than a couple hours. And I never think I leave anything behind. You can always go back. If you don't commit to the definition of you, then you never leave anything.
So, Jessica, I'm really bad at the beginnings, but I want to apologize to you first. So we did a podcast like a year ago, and then I kept telling you, oh, it's going to be up any day. Don't say hello yet. And my computer, before I uploaded it to Dropbox or the cloud, this magical place, the computer got destroyed for various reasons I won't go into, and I lost your interview. So now I'm so glad we're here to do it again. Hello, Jessica Banks.
Hello.
So that was a good hello. And what I want to describe how we met.
Okay.
So we met at this party, and I remember I was already asleep, and someone called me up and said, you have to go to this party that's just 2 blocks away from where you are. John Levy, who's a mutual friend of ours, he wrote the 2 a.m. Principle. He would have these influencer parties where people wouldn't know who they were, and he would invite them all in and cook a dinner, and they'd have to figure out who they were or whatever. And I had missed the dinner already, but I went to the party afterwards, and John said to me, you have to meet my friend Jessica, because I was telling him I really want to interview comedians, and he said, oh, you meet my friend Jessica because she used to work for one. But then while we were talking, you said to me something which I then wrote about, and it was a hugely popular article, and I wanted to interview just about what we spoke about. But along the way, I just want to introduce you a little. You're Jessica Banks. You run a robotic furniture company. You studied at MIT's AI lab. Before that, you worked for Al Franken, which we're going to have to get into that because now he made a joke about running for president. But the main thing was you said this thing, in order to get over your own shyness and nervousness when you were living in LA, you did a dare of the day. So what did you mean?
So it seemed to me that, I would always come in contact with these experiences where I felt like very reserved or nervous about. And I thought, okay,
like
I
what?
have to
sorry if I interrupt a lot, by the way.
No, I will interrupt you. It's my genetics, I think.
What are you, a Jew?
Yes,
no, I am
exactly.
Jew, so I can say
me
that.
Too. And I speak a lot faster, right? Jews talk faster.
Yeah, so you have to interrupt them. Just shut up already.
But yeah. Plus, I have a bad memory, so I will forget what I mean if I don't interrupt you.
Okay, quick question. I have a bad memory too, but it only started after I turned 40. Do you think after 40 you kind of like it's more experience it's more intuition than memory?
I think it's a little bit more, but I also think that you just like more stuff is happening, and maybe we're attending to more things, and so that it's more important we keep track of stuff, and so we realize when we don't. So like maybe there's more clogging plus more prioritization. I don't know.
We'll get to that because you are an artificial intelligence expert and studied it. I forget, did you get a PhD, master's?
I left right before my PhD. I got master's and an engineer's degree.
Okay, I left before I was thrown out before my PhD in AI, so we could at least converse about
Perfect.
it. But okay,
Otherwise,
Dare of the Day,
we cannot talk about it.
What were some of the weird experiences or uncomfortable experiences that led you to this Dare of the Day?
So often I would just be uncomfortable in front of people, right? Talking, having conversations. And I figured, well, maybe if I just make that thing very, very poignantly obvious, like an awkward, then I could get over it, right? So if it's even like talking to someone and ordering something at a cafe, so things would make me nervous. And
like why would that make you nervous?
I don't know, because I'm weird. And
how would you turn it into?
So it was like tell a joke or say something in particular, or like actually I started doing it when I was at MIT, and so like I would do things like be nervous in front of when I would teach, and so I'd get up and wear one shoe, right, as a Dare of the Day.
And would they notice? Would the kids notice?
Sometimes, but they don't really say anything, right? But the thing is, Dare of the Day is nice. So if I would dare myself to do something that if it suddenly occurred to me, you don't want to do this, I would say, I have to do this thing. I get this idea in my head and I'm like, okay, that's my dare. So I would dare myself to do it and I'd always win, right? You can't fail. So as long as you do the dare, even if catastrophic things happen, you still win that one little moment.
Okay, so there's lots of things to unpack in there. First off, would you ever... So the whole idea is really what I thought fascinating about this is I'm often awkward in many situations, and the idea of almost distancing myself from, it's almost like this mandate from the Justice League satellite or whatever, you have to do this Dare of the Day. But what if it's something you challenge yourself like, okay, I'm going to hug this homeless person, and then you just decide at the last minute, I'm not going to do it.
That's a fail. I mean, those moments, and maybe there's some part of me that sort of chooses ones that I also kind of know I can carry out. I mean, I don't take off all my clothes on the subway, right? I've sold a scarf on a subway.
Was that, so you would just go person to person?
Yeah. Well, there was someone selling it, and then I was like, I need to show him the better way to sell it. He kept lowering his price, and I felt like that's not good marketing, right? You're showing that you're not having valuable goods. So I took it over for him and showed him in the next car, raise your price or like create some sense of scarcity. And then, I don't know, maybe
Were you shy going
I was
from person
so
to person?
nervous, yes. But, then I think there was also the sense, which is like that people maybe kind of understood what was happening. I mean, I was selling one scarf and it was a little weird out of context, and I sold the scarf, but, who knows?
For a high price?
It was $4.
Okay, higher than he was asking in the other car?
It was higher, yeah.
So I remember when you told me this, two things. One is you refused to tell me an example dare, but afterwards I started doing a Dare of the Day, and it really does give this incredibly freeing feeling. So for instance, I think the next day I sat on Spring Street, just on the sidewalk, and just simply asked everybody passing by for money. By the way, it seems like it's interesting both dares here involve money, because that's something people are very uncomfortable about, I guess, and so it's a natural thing. Money and touching are like uncomfortable things. But like, what are some other potential dares?
So first of all, we met because of the dare, though, right? So before, what was it? We forgot that we were on that line of thought. So when we first met,
we met because John introduced us, but we were just talking about.
But I think you had something on your face.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. So maybe I did have something on my face. By the way, that's the first time you told me that. But what you did was I said, "Show me an example," and so you started like almost as if you were pulling something off my face.
You had a fuzzy on you.
Okay, so you started I didn't know that, but you started grabbing like as if you were like pulling some wisps of hair off my face, and that you said that was like an example thing. Like you wouldn't normally go up to a person who you just met and do that, and that kind of breaks down barriers and it makes everybody feel quasi uncomfortable, but then you've done it.
Right. So, and you've broken some like weird fourth wall, right? That's in between you guys. And then, I don't know. I think it works really great socially, but it also helped me get more comfortable just in general in all kinds of situations, because I knew that there were extremes I could go to and be super awkward. And even then, everything would be fine.
So like, what's another situation where maybe somebody was super confident and you felt awkward and you wanted to get out of your comfort zone, so you did one of these dares?
I did dance on, my friend was really, they had a big birthday bash, and everyone was dressed, the girls and women were wearing really pretty sexy dresses and things, and I kind of don't dress that way, but and so
You were in a potato sack?
I was in a potato sack and in a burlap outfit, and they and some of the girls were up on the table like dancing real sexy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just when the dare comes to your head. So I was like, I need to get up on the table and I need to do the robot like dance. And so I did that up there, and it was ridiculous, right? And everyone else was super sexy and party, and then I did the robot. And I'm not even a good robot. I'm kind of good, but
you practiced.
I do. I have practiced, yes. But those moments where it's really,
and
out
of
character,
make you feel free. Did that free you up?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the rest of that party?
I mean, I don't even know if it's not so much about that moment. I think it's about in general that it frees you from all the social constraints you think that you have. There's ways that in every experience and every interaction you can be super awkward, and even if you take it to the limit, you're going to be fine.
And again, it almost seems like permission, because if okay, I've done this dare of the day many times before, I'm going to do it in the future. It's almost like you're giving yourself permission that okay, it's not going to be that bad for me to do something unusual here, as long as it's not evil to somebody,
right?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be to a person either, right? Like it could be just something that is uncomfortable for you that makes you a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
I sort of feel like everyone's kind of trapped in their comfort zone, particularly in a place like Hollywood, say, where there's like these gods that walk the earth almost, these actors and actresses that everyone stays out of the way of. And then there's all their entourage of assistants and so on that have to be in their proper place. And so and they're very extroverted and you're kind of introverted. So was there ever a way how do you bridge that introversion gap when everybody else around you is extroverted?
I mean, that's the technique, is to use this as a vehicle. I used to be Al Franken's assistant, as you mentioned. And so once we were in LA and we went to somewhere where he was performing, and the woman who was about to introduce Al and was kind of prepping him said, was talking to him, and then I was just standing there and no one had introduced me. So it was kind of a weird moment. And so I just said, hey, I'm his signer, right? Like I'm going to do sign language. And it was so inappropriate and kind of also weird for me to have done that in that moment. But Al laughed. And so
did she know sign language? Did she know you weren't doing it?
She didn't. She was like, okay, right? But clearly I wasn't. And I was sort of, in that moment trying to make up for not being introduced, but also kind of a little angry I wasn't, and also trying, just like, screw it,
And that's funny too. Like, how did you think of the idea to sort of instead of just saying, hey, I'm Jessica, which is what everybody else does, you said, hey, I'm his signer.
I felt like I, needed a function or something. And so, but because Al also laughed at that moment, I felt, I got a little more feedback from the world that it's great when you can go outside of your comfort zone or do something a little unexpected.
And do you think in general doing all of these has kind of expanded your repertoire of ways to get out of a comfort zone in different situations?
Definitely, yes.
So let's say you're with a customer, so as I mentioned, you have a company that sells this, we'll describe it in a little bit, but robotics-based furniture, I'm going to call it. There could be many descriptions, but let's say you're in with a customer. Is there ever a way I sort of feel like every meeting or every context has like a genre. This is the customer meeting. Here's the first customer meeting. And it has to fit the most of the rules of that genre, but then you have to kind of break out of it a little bit. And you could do this dare of the day to do that. Like, what would you do to smash up the comfort zone of that first customer meeting genre?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the first thing you could do, and again, so when it's more like in that experience, I don't intentionally try to smash it up. If I feel suddenly I get the idea in the brain. When I told you, I think I was like, you're going to know what to do.
Right. Like that's why you didn't give me specifics.
Yes, I don't want to tell you. You'll feel it. Right. And then you did. The next day you're like, okay, I realize that I don't want to do this thing. I have to do it. And so it just sort of comes to me, and it's so, I mean, there could be, if I'm with a customer, it could be that I'm not trying to sell them something, or maybe, I'm trying to, get something from them, or I don't know. They're usually very specific though. So
like what's an example?
What's another one?
What was an example where you tried not to sell something? Was there ever an example like that? Or was just a possibility? That could be your next meeting.
Well, here's one where I actually did try. So there was, I went on this cruise ship that was about entrepreneurs and business people, and called Summit. And it was on this big cruise ship. And Barry Sternlicht, who has Starwood Capital, was speaking, right? So my friend had wanted to go see this talk, but I wanted to go see other talk. And she convinced me. I said, fine, we're going to sit in the way back of this huge auditorium on this cruise ship, and we'll listen. And I actually didn't realize it was Barry Sternlicht until he said his name. I'm like, oh no, I want to sell all my stuff to him to put in all kinds of hotels. And so I was really nervous, and I'm like, what am I going to do in this situation to get up there? So I waited for the end of the talk. I'm in my PJs because we had just done yoga, and it was that kind of, frou-frou sort of entrepreneur, melding kind of thing. And so I run up, and when I get to the front, because I had been in the way back, all of these guys were up there surrounding him on the stage, tons of dudes. And then they were blocking off the stage because Martha Stewart was supposed to come next. So I said to one of the cruise ship guards, which is not really a guard, right? I mean, he was...
Does he have a gun?
No, I mean, he probably also was a waiter. But so he was standing blocking. He said, no more people on the stage. And I looked at him, I said, there are 10 dudes up there. There's no way you're not letting a woman up there. So he didn't even move his feet. He just sort of leaned to the side, and I got up on the stage. And then when I got up there, I felt like I'm this struggling little fish. I'm going upstream. Then everyone said, everyone off the stage, we have to clear it for Martha Stewart. And I'm like, my God, I can't get a break here. So I just stood there, and I realized that they were, and this is where I started to do the dare, because I hadn't had a plan. So that they weren't looking at me trying to get me off the stage. And I realized they thought I was his assistant.
Huh?
Because I was probably only woman. And so I was like, fine, I'm his assistant. And so I just started being like, thank you, and whispering and pretending to write something. I don't even think I, had anything. I was just kind of looking at my hand, and whatever, no one cares. And so by the end, it was just the handler, me, and Barry Sternlicht going backstage and going off. And they both thought that I should be there because they didn't know any better. And so then...
And people will always assume... They'll always assume the truth. I think the brain is kind of wired to just assume, okay, this is a situation that's supposed to be happening.
Yeah, and I think that's even more, they're questioning themselves. I might be outside of some knowledge, and the other person has it, so I'll defer to that, right?
Right.
So you can kind of go with that often. So, and then as we're backstage, and I admitted to everyone, I said, hey, I just need to talk to you about some furniture. and
he must have been impressed with your initiative there, too.
Maybe. I mean, he was like, let's walk and talk. And so we did. He introduced me to Martha Stewart. They figured out how they were going to get their lift in their helicopter back to the island, things like that.
So the dare of the day is not only good for just in general self-improvement about, expanding your comfort zone. It can also be, used to kind of, rather than just saying please every step of the way, please can I stay, please can I get on the stage, it's kind of coming up with these creative, innovative ways of moving forward. And you exercise that muscle because this was not the first time you did it. You'd been doing it all along.
Mm-hmm. And so, you get more fluent at knowing what the dare should be, or even catering one, or, also acting faster. So response time is a big deal, right? Because if you suddenly realize that, oh, no, I don't want to do something. If you wait too long, you can miss an opportunity. Your own psychology will cause you to delay, almost to undermine yourself.
It's so funny because...
and protect yourself.
Do you know AJ Jacobs?
Mm-hmm.
So AJ and I challenged each other to what would be the equivalent of a dare, except it wasn't a dare of the day, it was like a dare of the month.
Yeah.
Which is what you're just saying, it was too long. And it was such an extreme dare, and I got really, personally... I don't know how to do it or if I could do it. So to the point where I even had to talk to my therapist about how I'm going to accomplish this dare that AJ and I have set ourselves.
What was it?
I can't say because it's actually going to be on another podcast. But I'll tell you afterwards. I'll get your advice. But how did you start working for Al Franken? Because it seems like a pretty big leap to go. You've done working for Al Franken in Hollywood and being at the MIT AI lab and then having your own company. You've done all these different things. So how did you start working for Al Franken? And is he going to run for president?
I'm not going to comment on that, only because I don't know, not because I'm not commenting, in quotes. I started working with Al because I first tried to interview for another job with another director and producer who I'm very good friends with, and he didn't hire me. So it was for a TV show. So I'd been working in entertainment. Maybe I need to back up. So I'd been working, no, I'm backing up even more. When I got out of college, I thought I was going to go into the military to become an astronaut, and then realized that was a very bad idea. So
I've had 3 different astronauts on the podcast.
Really?
So, and it's really hard to be an astronaut. And I believe 2 of them went to MIT, but it's incredibly difficult.
Yes.
So it's a bad idea for most people, but why was it a bad idea for you?
Because the military is probably not the best environment, social structure for me to thrive in. I had a liaison officer. It was a quarter of an inch too short. I stretched myself. I passed the height requirement.
What about the eye requirement?
Great. So, which is a whole other story. So, but that, and I was asking questions. I'm like, well, what, so I wanted to fly the shuttle, which meant I had to fly combat. So I was like, well, what if I have to bomb Israel or something I don't want to? And he's like, what are you talking about? You can't ask these questions. I'm like, you can't just quit, right? And so, yeah, and my questions were just completely naive and entitled, right?
It reminds me of, you ever see the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney?
No.
So Sandra Bullock plays
this.
She plays this reluctant astronaut, and Louis C.K. made this comment the next day after he saw it.
Oh no, I think I did see that.
Yeah, they're sort of lost.
Yeah,
and she's
lost. Does someone float away?
Yeah. George Clooney floats away, and so Louis C.K. is making this comment afterwards, why was this is so unrealistic? Who is a reluctant astronaut? Because Sandra Bullock was reluctant the entire time. In the interview, it would have gone like this. So do you want to be an astronaut? And she would have said, well, out.
Yeah.
Just get out. You're not allowed to be reluctant about any of these things.
Absolutely. And so I was reluctant about the combat, right? And about flying combat. And the military. And my mom said, Jess, you're a blonde hair, blue-eyed, Jewish girl from Wisconsin with her nose pierced, you're gonna hate it. And I think it was a cogent.
But
argument.
Why did you want to do it the fly combat way? Because you could have done it more the academic way as a researcher.
I am an extremist.
So you figure if you're going to go on the space shuttle, you're flying it. You're a control freak.
Control, yeah. And so then after I realized that I'm not going to go into space, I really was ill prepared for terrestrial future. I'm like, what on earth am I going to do on Earth? I really had no plan.
There was no job on the planet for you.
I was not thinking about that. And so I had done my undergraduate in physics and also in creative writing. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll write. And then I thought, well, I was dating a comedian at the time, and I'm like, I'll work for Comedy Central. So then I kind of got a entry level position at Comedy Central
in New York.
New York, yeah.
Okay.
And in HR and, kind of stupid doing admin stuff. But I got to know the whole company. And from then, when I realized I didn't want to stay there, I was able to branch out in that comedy world through my connections at Comedy Central. And, kind of led me down to talent management. We managed Louis, the agency.
I think, though, there's something to unpack there, which is that people don't realize that there's not shortcuts, but there are back doors. So you wanted to get into entertainment, it's an unlikely back door to get there through HR in a cubicle you worked.
Yeah.
Am I guessing in an office in New York?
Mm-hmm.
But that's how people do it. They go through back doors, and those are often the best shortcuts.
Totally, yeah. You have to push on every panel and see what is a door and then what you can open. And so that was really great. But my only writing experience at Comedy Central was since we were in HR, they gave everyone birthday gifts. And once an HR oversaw that part of it. So they decided to give this water bottle with the Comedy Central logo filled with Tootsie Rolls, right? And my boss at the time said, come up with the thing we're going to write on this water bottle. And I was like, holy crap, this is huge. Everyone in the company is going to get this. They're all going to read the thing I write. It has to be quippy and fun and on brand. And I was so nervous. And so that was my big foray into that kind of.
What'd you write?
I said, happy birthday. I hope no one else got you this.
All right.
I think it's still funny, right?
It's still funny. No one else got it.
Because it's a Comedy Central thing. It's filled with Tootsie Rolls. It's a water bottle. It was stupid.
Funny.
Okay, thanks. So that was one of my, and then after that, I left Comedy Central and I worked for 3 Arts Entertainment. talent management. And when I left that, a friend said, go talk to this other guy, John Marcus, amazing producer. And but he didn't hire me. And he said, but my partner in
Why
this
didn't he
show,
hire you?
he needed someone who was more experienced in show production, and I had never done any of that. I didn't even have a TV. I think that's part of it.
So you worked at Comedy Central with no TV?
It's correct, yes.
Okay, by the way, just to say, and sorry for interrupting again, but probably around the same time you were at Comedy Central, I was backdooring my way through HBO. I worked in the IT department at HBO, but was on the side pitching shows to them and even doing like a because I was in charge of their website.
Yeah.
I got them to do a web series, and that was my little foray in there.
So before the web, which is dating me, my friends were starting a browser or some like web something company, and I pitched to Comedy Central, you need to be on this thing called the internet, okay? And I wanted to run that whole department. I brought it to them. Like, I will take total credit for bringing the internet to Comedy Central.
I brought it to them. So in 1995, I visited them, their head of IT, and I said, you need to be on the internet.
I did that exact thing. And I was like, you have to do this thing. I think it's a good idea. And I'm like, then they hired somebody else. And I was beside myself, right? And at that, like, there's very few times where I really feel like I'm on the cutting edge of something. And I would have, like, what I'm saying is like, I change it. And probably no one remembers that I was pitching for that because I was a lowly HR admin.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, you really need to do this. We had a meeting about it, and I brought my friends in, and then they hired someone to take it to the next level.
Gosh, do you remember the name of the person they hired? I bet I know her.
It was a guy, and he was tall and blonde and lanky.
I did not know him then.
And I want to say it was Scott, but I know I could find it. Like, and I could ask my friends who it was because he headed that whole thing.
Because I knew the head of IT at Comedy Central, and
Who
that's
was
who I
that?
pitched it to her. I forget her name now.
That's
like
really
22
funny.
years ago.
No, yeah.
Our memories are going back.
There was
We're all over
another
40.
one guy called David something. He was in there too. Yeah, but this is a good conversation for later too. So I tried to bring them on the internet, and then.
So you knew the cutting edge, but you're in comedy, you love it, and you start applying for jobs outside of Comedy Central, and then how did you end up with managing artists and
then
help?
Well, my friend Larry Divney, who ended up to be president of Comedy Central, he said, well, go work for 3 Arts Entertainment. I know this guy Dave Becky, who's an amazing talent manager.
I knew Dave Becky at the time.
It was just his birthday.
I didn't know that. Well, I only knew him because I used to go to the Aspen Comedy Festival all the time, and he would set up interviews for me to do for HBO's website because he was representing all the comedians.
So I was his assistant at 3 Arts, but he would always go to LA. So it was only the two of us in the New York office at the time. So he would be in LA, and I would be handling New York when he would be there.
He was huge then, but he's even larger
I know,
now. He's like
I know.
he's
amazing.
He's the producer of every single sitcom right now. Like he's the producer of Louie.
I know.
Right? So
we managed Louie, we managed Mark Maron, Dave Attell, Upright Citizens Brigade, Amy Poehler, Matt Besser, great,
Amy Poehler, when she was just a member of the Upright Citizens Brigade.
Yeah.
Did you go to the Ludlow Lounge on Monday nights?
I ran it. Are you kidding me?
I would go every Monday.
Oh my God.
I would go every Monday.
And
Mark
Luna,
Maron, Jeanine Garofalo
there was Luna
performing.
Lounge, right? And
Yeah,
then
Luna
it
Lounge.
was Luna. Yeah.
Yeah.
No effing way.
Yeah.
Like
I was in the
I
audience
was
every
helping
day.
book it,
I mean,
and
every
I was
Monday.
helping make it. I was helping run the whole thing. Yeah. That's
All right.
insane.
I didn't know you were there.
Yeah, I was there.
I didn't know you then. I didn't know you until 20 years later.
Correct. It's correct. And actually, at one of those nights where we switched lounges at some point, I remember. And so, but my friend, so I remember this very, very clearly. My friend Aaliyah, who is now a producer in LA and came because I kind of yanked her with me when I went to go to do the show with Al Franken from New York, and she stayed. But I remember, had a cell phone, and I'm like, I'll meet you at Luna Lounge tonight. And she's like, call me at any time. I said, how am I going to call you? She said, I got this phone that I can take out in the world. And I'm like, that is so dumb. Okay, see, and then I, like, anything I did where I would have advanced my, self in the internet, getting Comedy Central on the web.
Right, you got
like,
so
I was like, cell
became
phones
a
are going to be
Luddite.
stupid. Right, exactly. So I always balance out in terms of, so I was like, that's so dumb. Why would anyone want to talk to people when they're out and about, right? And so I was like, whatever. And I actually had to use a payphone and find her. And she said, I'm over here to come find me. And that was the first time I was like, wow, that was really convenient. Okay, I understand a cell phone. She was one of the first people I knew to have a cell phone.
It's like around, I guess, 96, 97,
And it
96.
was exactly. And it was to help find her at Luna Lounge.
And then there was like a competitive one. I forgot who set it up. There was like another lounge type alt comedy place set up around the same time. But like everybody was like showing up at these things. Like, I don't know. Everybody. I'm just thinking of all the names that were there. It's funny.
Yeah.
And I was always scared to death because I felt like I really wanted to be a stand-up comedian just like them. Like I love the whole subculture of it, but I was just too terrified at the thought of it.
Yeah.
But again, I think this is another lesson. Like somebody wrote to me today and said, I'm 18 years old. How can I start pursuing my passions in life? And A, you don't know yet what your passions in life are going to be. B, there's no direct path. Like there are so many alternative paths and you're going to have so many alternative passions. You kind of have to be open to, it's just like what you did on the stage. It's not like you can just make an appointment and get on the stage and talk to the guy. You have to kind of take the back door way every time. And a lot of that is, again, I'll kind of umbrella this with this dare of the day, being comfortable with stepping outside that comfort zone so you can do this. So you can go from HR to pitching a TV show to working for Al Franken or whoever.
Yeah, and also don't commit to this definition of yourself any longer than like a couple hours even, I mean,
a couple of hours. That's important.
And I think that really will help you be flexible and it helps you have less ego about it, So I think there's a balance between the confidence and the ego, but when someone says, how do I pursue my passions? First, you're absolutely right. You don't really know your passions and you might not ever know them, even when you think you're, but there's not one thing. Like, how do you grow up to do the one thing and find my thing? There's no one thing.
There's no one thing. And not only that, there's this idea of respecting the combination also. Like you said, you majored in physics and creative writing. So we're going to keep on going with Al Franken, but you mentioned how at first with
we're going to keep on going with the famous person, but you...
Then we'll get back to you. No, but you started off going with physics down the astronaut route, like you had to be commander of the space shuttle. Then good thing you didn't go and blow up during that. But then you went to be HR at Comedy Central, but kind of engineered that into arts management, and then and you were running the Luna Lounge with the comedians. You got to know that whole subculture. Then and we'll make the bridge into Al Franken. But then the later parts of your story, you kind of combined all of these interests and in an interesting and innovative way. And I think people often say, "Well, no, I'm going to focus." Isn't focus the important thing? And focus is not that important. It's not as important as being creative and using all of your skills and combining them in a unique way.
I mean, we're saying that because we're not focused people.
But I wonder, like, okay, let's just take Louis C.K. as an example. He could have just said, I'm only a stand-up comedian. And he could have said, I'm going to just focus on that. Well, what did he do? He was also the head writer for 3 different late night shows. He's made like 5 different sitcoms. He's made at least 2 movies that I know of and probably more. He made his own sitcom on the web. He's done lots of he's been an actor in serious movies. He's done lots of different things as opposed to focusing.
That's true, but I would think that, let's say the astronaut that did go probably focused, right? And so I think that both things have merit in different, but there's still flexibility even when you're focused. You still be aware of what the rumble strips look like, right?
Maybe there's a compromise here, which is respect some sort of larger umbrella. Because like the last astronaut that's been on this podcast, he couldn't get in for various reasons on the military side. Including it took him a really long time to pass the eye test. So he went to MIT.
Can you just memorize the chart?
No, but what he did was fascinating, and he's the only person I know to ever do this. He actually, for a year, did exercises every day to improve his vision, and it worked.
You can. Yoga for Eyes. I have the book, my sister.
Oh, yeah? So he did that, and he really was focused, and he went from 2060 to 2020. But he then became an expert on robotic arms at MIT, got a PhD. He could have been a professor. Yeah. And then he had to become an expert at all these athletic things that astronauts do. So you still have to kind of combine under an umbrella lots of different skill sets to be the best in the world at the intersection of those skill sets. Mm-hmm. So
Even to be crappy in the world, I think it's important to combine all this stuff. Yeah.
Else you're just the worst in the world
Yeah.
at the one thing you focused in when everybody else was passing you by, because things change too. It's like you said, nobody had a cell phone when your career was getting started. If you just said, okay, well, I'm never going to get a cell phone, you have to kind of change into things that if you'd only focused on this is where my life's going to be from now on, you're going to miss all the things that change and all the ways that you change.
Yeah.
So, okay, Al Franken.
Yeah, there was one other thing I was going to say about that
Oh,
story.
Dave Becky. What was your funniest Louis C.K. moment? Not that if you can't reveal, that's okay too.
My funniest Louis C.K. moment?
Yeah, 'cause he's my favorite.
I know, me too. I can't remember. But I do remember there was one moment with Dave. So there were some funny moments with Pauly Shore. So we managed Pauly Shore at the time too. And I would always have to call and see how his numbers were doing and things. And I used to hate it because comedy clubs, and this is probably still the case.
What do you mean by numbers? Like his movie numbers?
Like how was people like buying tickets, reservations, and things like that?
Okay.
How were they doing? So was he filling all the seats? And I remember one day I was like, Dave was in LA. I was sitting at his desk with a big, black leather swivel chair. And I had my feet up on the desk because I just thought everything was hilarious about my life. I was like, how am I here? This is so, I didn't plan this. I'm not sure what I'm doing. And it's ridiculous that I'm actually, figuring this stuff out. And I remember just like being in that swivel chair, talking to Pauly Shore about like how his numbers were going at some club that he was about to be performing at. I was also think it was so ridiculous that so many comedy clubs. I think it's 5653. I'm gonna look at my phone, but I think that's how you spell joke. Hold on.
On a phone?
Yeah, and let's see. But I thought J5653. I fucking remember that. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a podcast.
I fucking remembered. So 5653 was how so many comedy clubs ended, and it's because it spells joke.
I did not know that.
And that kind of just crawled its way into my brain and probably knocked out like an equation. Anyway, so that little memory.
I'm gonna quiz people on that now. That's a good, like, how do you spell joke on a phone?
Yeah. Ask funny people that, right?
All right.
What were we asking?
So Pauly Shore, you're on the phone, going over his numbers, club.
Yeah, and I remember thinking like, I'm ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
But again, to unpack that, there's a concept I call ready, fire, aim, where you obviously know what you're ready for, or sort of, like you want to do something, you wanted to work for Dave Becky and work in the comedy space. But too many people spend a lot of time aiming. Like too many people might think, oh, well, I've got to write a screenplay, or I have to spend 5 years doing stand-up before these guys will even look at me, or I have to be on the other side of Comedy Central instead of the HR side. And too many people stop themselves thinking that they've got all these hurdles they have to jump over first, when in fact you can just fire, and now you're at the main desk talking to Pauly Shore, and then who knows where that leads, because you're going to fire again in the next stage. I
want to use like a different, because all of it, in this political climate, fire first is not the best way to talk about it, but there is, something first. I do, and there's a better word I want to use, but I totally agree. To fire first.
All right, challenge for the audience. Just tweet us out. What is better than ready, fire, aim? What's your Twitter handle?
Rock, paper, robot, or Jessica Banks. I don't even think I know.
I see you're a Luddite still. You go back and forth.
Rock, paper, robot is a good one.
Rock, paper, robot, at Rock, paper, robot on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. So now, why didn't you just stay with Dave Becky? He was managing all these comedians, starting all these shows. Why'd you go to Al Franken?
Well, I quit with Dave because also at the time, and it was funny because I would do a lot of talent scouting too, and people knew I was at 3 Arts, right? And so a lot of times people would pander to me a little bit when they're on stage, and I hated that feeling. I had a napkin always, and I would write. It would look like I was taking notes, but I would had this, and I can't totally remember it, but this little rubric for when I would get up and go. If they made a toilet seat up joke, if it was a guy or a girl made that
was a no-go.
That was like, I immediately get up and leave, right? Okay. I remember that one. But
that's just too easy?
Yeah. It was like, there's nothing of, either it's no innovation.
Even though the very first recorded historical joke that they've discovered, like archaeologists have discovered, is a guy joking about his wife farting. That's the first archaeological joke.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
What, where? And what culture?
I don't know, but Stephen Dubner, who's been on the podcast, he wrote Freakonomics. He's the one who told me. So he studied this.
But I heard there was like this
It was like
crazy
a Babylonian thing.
hieroglyphic joke.
I think that was it.
I'm making that up. Are you serious?
Yeah, I think they saw this on a wall because nobody recorded this. They saw this on a cave wall.
And they just assumed it was a joke?
Yeah, it was like a woman sitting on a king's lap and making a noise.
Really?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So okay. So
Okay, well, that is
but
hilarious.
those jokes out.
Right. So that aside, I was like, no. And so I would write, and I would, if they hit like 3 parameters or like the big one.
What was
I
another one? So I know to avoid
I can't
this.
even remember them, but I had them and I would write on them, and I thought, okay, they're thinking that I'm taking notes, and that's fine. And then I would just go if they like kind of hit it, and so I would leave. So, but I also got tired of hearing, and I kind of think, or at the time, and maybe even still now, think I'm funny in a way. So I was thinking often that I was funnier than a lot of the talent that I was seeing, and I got tired of that. So I ended up wanting to move on.
But isn't that going to be just the nature of the beast? Because if you're a talent scout or if you're, let's say, a book editor, 1 out of 100 things will be what you want. So
Yes.
most of the people will be, and you'll also have, because you've seen so much, you're going to have a high sense of taste. So you're just going to, in general, see a lot of bad things.
And if you're like Dave, for instance, and you have like a very acute sense of what is, culturally, socially, psychologically humorous, it means you're good at that thing, right? So just naturally. So sometimes and he is funny, right? He's a hilarious person. So he is good at detecting humor and understanding what will work.
And there was such a difference. Like there was such a difference between the guys who were like number 1 and everybody else. Because I remember,
I'm going to text him right now while we're talking.
all right, he won't remember because this is
Okay.
like. But Aspen Comedy Festival, I remember one time I interviewed
Chris Rock, we managed.
I did the website for the Chris Rock Show.
No.
Yes, and I did the
That is
website
ridiculous.
for I did the website for
I'll
Mr.
text
Show, Bob Odenkirk
You-
and David Cross. It's my favorite show.
I
and I
loved it.
interviewed Bob Odenkirk and David Cross at
They
the Aspen
came
Comedy
always
Festival.
to Luna, right? They were.
Yeah, David Cross at
David
least
Cross,
was.
Yeah.
And they were so funny when I was interviewing them. This tells you how long I've been doing interviews. So
This is, by the way, I'm doing a dare right now by texting on.
all
during
right,
this
good. So, but I will tell you, he won't remember me, even though we were working in that circle. But I was interviewing David Cross and Bob Odenkirk, who is now, of course, Better Call Saul
Yes.
and
Oh
Breaking
my
Bad.
gosh.
And they were so funny the way they were riffing off of each other, which just goes to show you how in-person humor is much different than YouTube humor. They were so funny that I was hurting so bad I had to leave the room. Like my stomach was hurting. I was laughing so much. Like the best guys in person were just out of control.
I agree.
So, and it's funny too because I went to school, and he's been on this podcast. I went to elementary school with Jim Norton, and we always knew he was very funny. And now, of course, he's famous comedian. But there's always a difference, I feel. And he's still top tier. But even though he was number 1 by far in our little school, he's among a big group of comedians who are funny in the professional world. Like it's really hard to kind of be number 1, to be like David Cross or Louis C.K. or someone like that, or Amy Schumer or whoever.
Right. Yeah. And it also does, I see when breaks happen for people, like when sort of a momentum or there's a tipping point in a career.
Like
that
what's an
often-
example?
I mean, I think like Louis hit this, in the last couple of years with
With
the
his show.
right?
And maybe some of his specials right before the show. I can't remember which came first.
David wrote back, be nice. Nice.
So that's a clever way of saying, so he wrote back, be nice. That's a clever way of him not knowing who I am at all, but just saying something that could fit the situation. Good job.
Pivot.
And dare of the day.
Obfuscate, right.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. So, okay, you were a talent scout. You were disappointed. You felt you could be funnier. Al Franken.
Because I was still kind of, didn't think that I wasn't really there to be there, right? I had got a new job and I wasn't trying to just start to do comedy, and I think I was just ready to move on, essentially. And then So I can't remember who introduced me. I think Dave might have introduced me to John Marcus, and then John didn't hire me, but we got along really well. And John Marcus said, I'm doing this show, because it was for a show that Al and John did together that was on called Late Line for NBC, I hope. So John said, I need someone who's done production and admin for that and knows how to run a show before. And I had no idea. So he said, but talk to Al. He needs an assistant and you seem really smart. And I thought he was blowing smoke up my ass. I was like, thanks, whatever, but no thanks. But then he called me and said, okay, go. Al, and he introduced me to Al. And now I'm going to be really honest here, is that I didn't know who Al Franken was when John told me that.
Well, because you didn't have a TV and he'd only been on Saturday Night Live at that point.
And so I did other kind of comedy, which I just didn't know. And I also am kind of bad with names and cultural references.
Like he's not a stand-up comedy guy.
I was outside of that. And so, and I went home and I was like, I'm going to go interview with Al Franken. And my parents were really excited. And I was like, okay. And then I got to Al's house and I was like, that's, the thing he did on Comedy Central was, I'm good enough. I'm sorry, Stuart.
Oh, yeah.
Stuart Smalley. And I sat down. I think that's Stuart. Like when I was sitting in his house, and then got the job, and I was his assistant. And then we did a show out in LA. And then when I was actually out in LA, I saw a documentary called Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control by Errol Morris. Ever seen it?
I haven't, but in who just recommended it? Morgan Spurlock says that's like his favorite documentary.
Okay.
And then Hoop Dreams was number 2.
I loved it. So I saw this movie on a whim out in LA when I was working out there. And it's about a naked mole rat specialist, a lion tamer trainer for circus, things like this, a topiarist who they cut trees into shapes, and a roboticist. And they all go through this, it's just very thematic.
Why do they throw all of them together?
It's a very diverse group that have different takes on, similar subjects. What is the meaning of life, and what is it, what is kinds of beauty, things like this. And so,
how did they make a story out of that, though?
So, and there's background to that, because I think the first, and I might be making this up, so I just want to just say that from the beginning, but I feel like I've heard the story where the first person who started to do this, where I think maybe Errol had a hard time putting it together. We should fact check this. Also,
I'm going to get him on this podcast and I'll ask him.
Can you call him right now?
My phone's dead. Else I would do the dare of the day.
And then they hired someone else, a woman, to come in and really edit and fix it. And I think she might have passed away at some point, but I think that it really came together from her efforts. And I would have to say, even if all of that is not true, what the end result is a wonderful, paralleled story of many different perspectives and lifestyles.
I'm going to have to see it. So What's it called again?
Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control.
By Errol Morris.
Yes. So in this, there was a roboticist, okay? And the roboticist was Rodney Brooks from MIT. Now, because I'm bad at names and everything, I didn't really remember this, but...
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you just 1 second. So in 1989, I was an undergrad majoring in computer science and deciding which graduate school to go to for computer science. And Rodney Brooks came to speak to my class. And I remember he kind of totally, I was a kid who had grown up on kind of the science fiction version of what a robot was. And he totally changed my impression of what robotics is. It's this society, and computer science then kind of respected the fact that you could discover lots of small things, and that's how you can learn, as opposed to suddenly being fed the encyclopedia and now you're alive. So just by as background, he
a bottom up approach to.
Yeah, he had this bottom up approach, and a way to understand it is he's kind of the inventor, I think, of the Roomba, right? Like the vacuum cleaner just bumps into walls until it figures out what the room looks like.
But a lot of people interpret that as smart, right? But it has a controlled algorithm with heuristics, right? So
well, everybody says, and I think Kevin Kelly says this: AI seems magical until the day after it's done, and then it's just like statistics.
Yeah, I think even they call that the AI effect or something, where it's magical until it becomes known, and then people just assume it's just computation, and so it no longer, the more important AI becomes, the less conspicuous it actually.
Well, I think people conflate intelligence with consciousness. And,
yes, and these people conflate these so much, and even the notion of what is intelligence is arbitrary,
right,
and hard for people to grasp.
Right, like so, at the time that a computer was able, for instance, to beat the world chess champion, it wasn't able to recognize a face.
Exactly.
And now, of course, it can recognize faces better than any human can. And we just realize that it's just sophisticated statistics. And so we think, well, what's the next thing? It's not really conscious yet.
Or if someone is a chess player and they can beat everyone all the time, they're brilliant. And if the computer does it, it's pretty bright.
Right. Or so it's just a computer, it's just a box.
That's just rule following and brute force computation.
Which, by the way, again, chess.
So, and I believe humans are too. I mean, I'm a total reductionist, but
humans are what?
Pretty much brute force, like rule following, like how we work.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because with chess, what they realized to make the first.
I feel
world
like we need a whiteboard of all the things we have to go back to.
No, that's okay. Well,
okay.
We'll keep unpacking.
Okay.
I keep track. This is one area where my memory's halfway decent. But with chess, the big insight they had, because I went to Carnegie Mellon for grad school, so my office mate made what was then called Deep Thought, and then IBM bought it and it was called Deep Blue. Yeah. And they would train it by having it play me all the time. And because I was the only, let's say, master level players left in the school. The other one had graduated. And so I think that's the only reason why I got accepted to grad school and why I was specifically put in this office. But what the insight they had is that this is not a software problem. We're going to make this a hardware problem. And they just made it as fast and stupid as possible. And that's what beat the world chess champion. They took out all the learning part and just made it brute force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyway, there's a roboticist in the documentary.
It becomes a hardware problem. So can we just completely do this by the speed of everything that we can? Yeah.
And I feel that was Rodney Brooks' insight on robotics. So, but he was a roboticist He was in
this movie. And so when I went to see the movie, I was like, great. And there was a girl in the movie too, and she was interacting with the robot. I'm like, there's a girl in there. I could be a girl in robots too, right? I could do that. And robotics team physics and sculpture, which I had done physics undergrad. I did a lot of art stuff. And so I'm like, this is perfect. And I went back and I applied to MIT. And
so you were working for Al Franken as an assistant in Hollywood. You had gone from HR and Comedy Central to working for, a big comedian manager to being a talent scout to working in LA for Al Franken, very funny guy. You had a career path, but you're going to go apply to be a roboticist at MIT across the country.
Well, I thought then, so I was only visiting at LA because we did the show out there. So I was still in New York. I had, Craigslisted it out at the time. So, and I saw this movie and I was like, I'm going to be a roboticist. And so I came back, I applied to MIT when we got back from the show. And when I was on the website applying, I read, because I had totally forgotten, Rod Brooks just in Errol Morris's movie. And I was like, what a coincidence. I thought MIT because I was like, what's the best place I can go? I'm going to pick that. And then I'm going to apply. Nowhere else. And
Carnegie Mellon had a good robotics department.
They did, yes. And that is totally true. And then, but again, I knew MIT. I just went for it, right? And so, and my parents, they were like, Jess, don't put all your eggs in one basket. MIT is a really tough place to get into. I remember I was typing it on this thing, a sort of a typewriter, electric typewriter I had gotten for my bat mitzvah, I think. I typed out my application to MIT.
What the hell? You didn't have a word processor?
It was a word processor. That's what it was. I just forgot.
It wasn't a computer though? It wasn't
No,
a
it
Mac?
didn't have a screen. Not then.
Huh.
We didn't. I didn't, no. Okay, yes, I realized I did not have a laptop. Okay, so I did it on there, and I sent off this pack of, stuff to MIT, and then a couple months later, I got a call that said, congratulations, Rod Brooks wants you to be in his lab.
Wow, and that's, I want to say just because I know they had a 3% acceptance rate, that you kind of had to know, you had to know how to program. Did you know how to program a computer?
No.
And you had to have great references. It was really hard for me to get into graduate school.
Al gave me a recommendation.
So again, what an amazing backdoor. If Al Franken can give you a reference.
Imagine I was an astronaut now and then ended up in space and I'd be like, so I started off at entry-level position at Comedy Central.
Yeah, that would be, but it's almost equivalent. You got into basically MIT's AI lab or robotics lab, not only because of a passion for it, which you obviously had, and you were able to address the fact that you were aware of Rodney Brooks' work, but you kind of didn't have some basic hurdles that somebody accepted to MIT, which was the #1 computer science graduate school in the country. You didn't have some what I would consider extremely basic hurdles, but you did have huge back doors in the backdoor way of MIT. You saw a documentary and you were Al Franken's assistant.
And it turns out then, when I got there, the girl in the movie, Cynthia Brazil, ended up to be my office mate.
That's incredible. So did you ever think to yourself, though, like, this is ridiculous. I need to at least take like a programming class at NYU or something to get ready.
I sat in there. Yeah, I sat in on and I made friends with it because I'm like, I don't want to pay for this. I can't. I also have a job. Can I just come to the class and sit in? And I made friends. I totally had forgotten this with the professor, and I sat in on a programming class at nights at NYU.
So again, I think this is so important. People realize, well, I can't get into MIT. I'm an accountant at Procter & Gamble. There's no way it's going to happen. There's ways to do things. Like the world.
The way to do things is do them. Right. Like
that's a good point. Like you have to do it.
Yeah. Just try all the kinds of every permutation of opportunity. Do them.
Yeah, and like let's say you hadn't gotten into MIT, you probably would have gone on to maybe this bigger career in comedy, or found maybe you'd be a topiatrist or make topiarist.
That's probably not how you say it.
So you go to MIT, you study under Rod Brooks, who went on. I think he also started the company iRobot, right?
He did.
It's a public company.
Oh, cool! I'm glad you brought it up because every day. Okay, I'm gonna just look at this pen I carry around with me. Okay, are you ready?
Okay, so you're showing me a pen. It doesn't look like a pen, by the way.
But it does say iRobot on it, right? I've had this in my bag or on my person for years because of this.
Wow. So the pen, you hit a button, the pen opened up.
It's a transformer pen, and it doesn't even work as a pen anymore, but I love the motion so much that I just keep it in my bag to remind me of mechanisms that make me feel good.
Well, and I think also, like, that does look pretty just looking at it. You can do that over and over again.
It
so people
feels
forget.
good.
People forget that with technology. Yeah, people forget that with technology, there's an element of design because there's got to be usability.
And
things have to look good, feel good.
Yes, and so
I want this. Can I get one of these?
You can get one of these. Do you want this one?
I don't want that one.
If people want the things I have more than I feel like I want them, I give it to them.
No, I would never want that more than enough to
you're gonna lose
take it from you.
Right?
Yeah, I'll lose it or give it away.
Okay, I'm gonna keep it then. So wait, you just had a great point, or I was gonna have a great point.
Well, if you hadn't gotten into MIT, which was distinctly possible because you were totally unqualified for it, what else would you have done?
I don't know.
All right, well, that's an important thing too, to just kind of pursue the things you're interested in right now, not have like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. If you know that if you're going to be a passionate, interested, hardworking person, which obviously you had been to this point, you're going to just keep doing things, doing. And so you arrive at MIT, and you become a roboticist. You become a robotics expert.
Yeah, and I remember when I first got in, like just by getting into MIT, I thought suddenly I was smart just because I got in.
Which is true, by the way.
No, it's not actually true. So like I, and like within a month or two of being there, right? I was like, yeah, I'm at MIT, like having this weird ego transition, which would soon be totally demolished. But I remember my mom, we were sitting around the table. I went home for some holiday and my mom dropped the clicker for the TV in her soda. Okay. And I was like, no problem. I got this. Like,
you're a roboticist.
I go to MIT. I'm going to fix this. Utterly broke it. Okay. And I really was like, oh, I forgot. Like, you have to learn stuff about the things that you're trying to do in order to be good at them.
But it's scary. Like, so again, I went to not number 1, which was MIT, but maybe it was like number 3. Like, let's say there was MIT, Stanford, and then Carnegie Mellon for computer science. And I was just looking around at the other classmates. I was so stupid compared to them.
I was so...
Okay, but I was thrown out. You at least got a master's degree or 2 out of it.
I mean, I was like... It was clear I wasn't going to probably get my PhD. I just didn't have it in me at the time. And I don't think that I was smart enough even to do it. And so...
But if you could get the master's degree, you could get the PhD.
Yeah. But I mean, there was other things. They know you're learning, right? And that the goal is the PhD. So part of that is a slippery slope, right? I mean, and I could, pass tests and things like that. But
you had to like sit there and build robots in the
did
lab
learn.
too.
And so actually, when I was at MIT, a couple things happened. One, I felt like I learned how to use my hands for the first time, for real, because I learned how to build stuff. And as a young girl, I didn't do a lot of building. All my colleagues, most of my colleagues were male at MIT, and they had grown up building skateboard ramps and breaking their arms. And I was basically trying to feather Barbie's hair. That was the extent of my physical,
which would work really well with
daring,
Ex Machina,
risk-taking, right?
When the
Exactly.
female robots happen.
And Barbie's hair does not, at least then, it did not feather because the plastic does not act the same way as normal hair. But anyway,
I did not know that.
so it's true. So I was really, I had this huge kind of leap into feeling comfortable making things and using these huge, mills and lathes that were way bigger than I was and loud and sharp. And
Did you have to get comfortable? Because this was a hard thing for me in graduate school. Did you have to get comfortable saying, I don't know this, can you explain it to me?
I can't fucking believe you just said that. So for 2 years, I did not say that.
Because it's a hard skill. People don't realize.
Instead, what I did was I wrote down everything that I didn't understand in a conversation. I went home and Googled. Okay. Oh. After about 2 years, I don't know what it was. And I kind of remember, I don't remember what it was about, but I remember who I was standing with. And I actually said, I don't know what you mean. And the person told me. And something clicked in that moment where I was
like a magic power
I was
now.
like, this is the question, right? And I was like, how efficient is this? I get to just basically have the person, I don't have to go home and Google that. They just told me. And after that, it was like seriously a rebirth of wonder of like, I don't know anything. And I'm going to ask everyone, even when I did know something, I would be like, I don't know what you mean.
I think that technique works really well. And and there's variations on it too. There's listen, back up for a second. Pretend I'm really stupid and just explain to me like you would explain to a little child. And I find that works really well too.
Yeah.
Because then you're being humble but also putting a little distance between yourself and your ignorance. Because it's like pretend I'm a little child.
Imagine I'm playing a role here.
Yeah.
And then, that's a great way to put it. And I really found that was just, it opened up everything to me. And I realized that like, this is how to really go about being here. Right, is to embrace everything I don't know, and even when I did know, bring in what like ask more. Say I don't know.
Yeah, just being really upfront about it and being honest.
Always know, right, and always be kind of let someone tell you their perspective, or maybe they add knowledge or things like this, and so that really helped for the rest. And I wish it had happened sooner.
So by the time, though, you get through, first off, did you ever regret leaving behind the comedy scene for the robotics scene?
No. And I never think I leave anything behind. You can always go back.
Right.
So that's another thing. That's when if you don't commit to a definition of you, then you never leave anything. You can you're just kind of in a different thing.
Right. So if you don't have like a comma, like if you're not Jessica Banks roboticist or Jessica Banks entrepreneur, you could change your comma any day.
Right. So basically,
you're at school for a couple of years and you become
a lot of years.
A professional roboticist, and then what?
And then I got hot. So we were in a Frank Gehry building. So during the time that I was there, we changed where our offices were from this older building on campus to a new Frank Gehry building. And at one point, Frank Gehry came through.
The famous architect, just a background.
Yes.
He did the Global Building in Venice. He, what other building? He did a building here in New York that looks all...
like waves and on the West Side Highway. It's the
IACI building?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically... So he came through to see the building and how we were all staying in there, and they were working on a new project. His colleague and he was with his colleague, and they needed some roboticists. And Rod Brooks let me and a friend go. My friend who just he ended up his company got bought by Google, Mecha Robotics, and was their head roboticist, over there.
So this is probably the first time an architect goes to MIT saying, hey, do you have some spare roboticists you can lend us?
Could have been, So, and Rod said, go ahead if you want to work on this project, Aaron and myself, and we went to go for the summer to New York and worked with Frank Gehry. And Frank was in California, but we worked out of another office in our now office.
What did an architect need a roboticist for?
So they were working on a project for a casino and hotel thing that was going to be in Sentosa, Singapore. And they wanted to do something called a robotanical garden. So they wanted to show that there would be these robots in the gardens, and parts of the gardens would be automated and mechanized and moving, and that people could interact with these kind of, creatures. And so
did the things in the garden have awareness of the humans around them? Were there like radar in the flowers?
Basically this was the RFP, right? So they were just kind of trying to think, how much background can they get? Really, we didn't have to work out a lot of the logistics, which are a lot harder, right? And so we were trying to help advise on whether or not that kind of interaction would be okay with just general people all the time coming in, and what kind of feedback loops there would have to be, and in order to be able to interact with people at close distances, especially if these were very big creatures, things like that. So, and we were designing them. So,
was he a nice guy to work
Frank
with?
Gehry?
Yeah.
Amazing.
If you told him something's
Amazing.
impossible, would he say okay, or would he push, or?
I don't think we ever said. I never say that.
Okay. I can tell.
But he was totally open and encouraging and supportive and bright-eyed. Yeah, he's amazing. So then, they didn't win the RFP, unfortunately.
So
there's a weird series of events.
I want to use this as a moment to recap. So you're going from not being rejected as an astronaut to HR to comedy, various.
I wasn't rejected. I rejected it.
You rejected being a combat veteran in Israel. Somehow the U.S. was going to invade Israel in your imagination, and you wouldn't be able to be the commander of the space shuttle.
I wouldn't be able to.
So that's why you're not an astronaut today. So you went from that to all this kind of circuitous route to being a roboticist, and eventually we're going to get into your other.
I don't support all of Israel's policies, just as an aside. Okay.
All right. So we won't make this a political argument. We could. I don't even know what side I am on there, but I think it's an interesting thing that all this idea of. I didn't realize it at the time when you first told me about Dare of the Day, but it's all related to you just kind of saying nothing's impossible in terms of your career and then your success in each area. Like you went from being in HR, then suddenly you're working for the best, kind of agent or manager in the business, Dave Becky. I don't know if you call him an agent or a manager. Yeah. Then Al Franken, then the best roboticist in the world. Then you're working for the architect Frank Gehry, the most well-known architect, living architect right now. And is he alive? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what's next? Because I know where we end up. You're running a company right now doing robotics furniture. We haven't even gotten to the furniture part yet.
We haven't done that.
But I think maybe the Frank Gehry part gets you into design a little bit.
I mean, it got me more into it. I think my dad is an industrial designer. He was manager of industrial design at GE for GE Medical for many, many years, 25 years, I think. And so I think genetically I have some of that going on. Plus, I probably smelled so many markers when I was younger that, maybe it did something to my brain also. Because I always had these huge...
I love those old magic markers.
Oh, yeah.
But wait, at any point during this, I mean, did you ever get, depressed?
I'm always depressed.
So what would you...
But I don't think it was because of these things. I think it's my nature. But, of course.
But it doesn't seem like in a career way. You kind of let stuff slide in a career way.
I think in some ways that's very true.
You wouldn't get anxious about it.
I don't. Yeah, no. I get anxious about the success of my company now, and because I feel that I have mouths to feed. But I think there's a weird thing I do, which is I distance myself a little bit from all the reality that happens. It's just these are things that are happening, and I'm also happening in parallel with all these things.
But did you have some kind of inner confidence that you can always sort of have faith in that, okay, I'm going to do this, and if it doesn't work, something else will happen?
I want to be able to say yes to that, and I don't think it doesn't feel like inner confidence. And I also think when I go back and, I read this the definition, WIG historian, putting things to that happened in the past, that making them seem like they linearly were, predestined to some future that we have arrived at. Like, I think that happens often when people look back at their lives and they want to rationalize choices or things that happened to them into sort of a logic. And I'm not sure that actually that's really what happened. I wandered and meandered and fell into things and, tried stuff and kind of went with the moment a lot of times. But it wasn't always me being like, I wasn't trying to do necessarily each thing.
But I think there also is an element of trusting your gut. Like, you saw this documentary and something like lit up inside you when you saw the roboticist. So it's sort of like you recognize the difference between something that really lights you on fire to, I'm going to have to deal with another, this or that. Right. So okay, so Frank Gehry, and then did you go back to MIT to finish degrees, or?
Then after that summer where we spent working, I thought, I should stop. And I told Rod, he's like, yeah, I agree. You should.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? Was that an insult?
No, it was an honesty.
Okay.
If it's an insult if I have an ego, but if I think it's supportive. I mean, basically I wasn't doing the best job. I was really more interested in doing tech art back then. I was kind of in this other world of that people who were doing like electronics and artwork and exhibits. And so I found that, and I really wanted to be in that world. And
like, what was an example? Because I'm trying to.
So, well, I mean, my friends and I did a project together actually that was called Photron 2000. We made this robotic photo booth. So you would go in, and there was a robot arm in the back of this photo booth, and it had LEDs at the end of this end effector, and so we how to explain this? So those LEDs at the end of this arm were moving around underneath an open shutter of a Polaroid camera. So essentially, we were drawing with light and an open exposure. So you'd go into this photo booth, you'd see yourself moving around, press a big button, get your picture taken. That picture was then image processed into grayscale levels that we would associate, and contours that we would then assign to an LED. And then one of the LEDs would light up and draw that closed contour. Okay.
So what would it?
So and then the shutter of the Polaroid would open, robot would draw, shutter closed, spit out, and you would get your portrait drawn in light.
So you couldn't fix the remote control,
this was much
but you built a robotic photo booth.
It was much later. And what was cool about that? It was my friend Dan's idea. We worked with this other guy, a friend of ours, Jonathan, who, did much of the code, and Dan built a lot of the robot. We did it together, and we all kind of kludged this whole thing together. We built this cool thing. And the way that we actually decorated the outside on our, we did two versions. So when they were doing the Frank Gehry building, I noticed there was all this really cool cladding that they were putting around the whole building. So I made friends with one of the guys, and I went up to one of the workers. I said, does it ever fall off? Can you have scraps? We're building this thing. And the guy...
What were they putting around the building?
It's like this cladding. So a lot of the Gehry buildings have this folded metal that kind of fits into itself. And it gives this kind of it looks like scales on a fish or something like that. So I was like, we need to put that on the outside of our photo booth. It would look sick, right? And it would be perfect. So I went to one of the guys, and he's like, I got you covered. Come over to this, place, back in the construction thing. I was like, okay. So he said, bring the dimensions of your photo booth. I brought the dimensions. He made us 2 colors, custom cladding from a Frank Gehry building for our photo booth. So we made this, tech art piece, and we clad it in the actual material that the Frank Gehry building was being made with.
So what year was this?
Oh God, 2006 maybe.
Because
5?
I feel like then you're sort of you embarking on the path of, let's say, combining art, computers, robotics, a little bit of comedy, and this is the path that you've kind of stayed on. This is like what your company, in a sense, does in a very innovative way, revolving around furniture. So like, what was the leap from that to this?
So then I just knew that I wanted to, do something in the world that was a combination of design and art and sculpture, and also used all my, technical acumen that I had gotten from my training. And so, part of me was like, I got right after I left school. So I taught for a while at MIT, first of all. And then
Just random, just throw that out there.
Yeah,
You're trying to make me feel bad, like I got thrown out of graduate school.
Even if you quit, they let you teach. So, so then I basically, thought I want to make cool stuff in the world, and that's functional. And so started off with this one piece, and I realized, this is a sculpture, but it really, I think the engineer side of me was like, it needs to be super functional. It's not just sculpture. So it's like, it can be a table. So it's this levitating table that has all these cubes that levitate with respect to one another. And then that just got me thinking of more and more, different pieces of functional art, essentially. And then it became, okay,
Well, functional art, because like people use a table, people use a chair, people use dishes, and then combining, sort of like technology to it could turn it into art, like something that we didn't quite expect, and make it more usable in a weird way.
Right. And also can make it so, right now we went from all functional art to now a broader demographic with our new stuff, which we're doing Kickstarter about next week. And then we're doing, if you think too, where we're going and what we're starting to work on is, imagine your chair and your table could call 911 if you're having a heart attack, or could keep you from ever having repetitive stress injury or eye strain or back pain.
So okay, let's so the chair with the 911. So I'm sitting in the chair. It could like read like almost like a pacemaker my heart rhythms, and if it's going crazy, it could
do
the
things
call to
right,
911.
and it could know. There could also be a camera somewhere where you're sitting to understand what's happening, because you can see what your heart rate is also through camera. So you can because we're furniture makers, we have really an interesting perspective that we have many touch points that we can like get redundant feedback from you, right? And we can also understand use cases on, many different use cases, and we have so much information. So essentially that can be combined with, so that real-time information could be combined with your quantified self data that, is maybe saying, okay, you're this old and you maybe have diabetes, or you're 4 months pregnant, or you had hip surgery and all this other stuff, or how active you are, and then come up with a solution that could help you. And so I think a lot of the quantified self, products, there's a high attenuation rate around. People
what do you mean
find
by
out
attenuation?
So people find out they're a bad sleeper because they put this thing on their pillow, or they're wearing something, and nothing in the world reacts and helps them get to be a better sleeper. So instead, you lie in bed and you fret that you're a bad sleeper, and you're not, the world isn't helping you fix that problem necessarily. So people stop using these devices often. And, but that wouldn't be the case if the world then said, okay, I just found out you're a bad sleeper. If I'm your bed, I'm going to help you. Or I'm your room, and I'm going to change your temperature because I noticed you wake up when this happens. And I'm going to do something with sound and something with light. And I'm also going to maybe shift you in certain ways because I noticed you also are snoring, or you might have sleep apnea.
Well, it's interesting because this is a little bit related to the AI and intelligence versus consciousness discussion. But there's this idea that for a long time we were humanists. Like I would listen to another human as opposed to being theists. Like instead of listening to God telling me I'm sick, I would listen to a doctor telling me I'm sick. But now we kind of listen to data more than anything. We've sort of outsourced our decision making to some extent and more to data. And like you say, there's all these touch points with furniture. So people don't think of the connection really, because it seems like an odd connection between furniture and what we interact with all day long, every day, and actually the data to make decisions to improve our lives. And that's in a sense, the direction your company has been going.
Yeah. And so, we make fun of often of people who throw around this IoT phrase, Internet of Things. because it's become ambiguous.
Because it's only a way to brand yourself to make $1 billion,
Exactly.
but okay.
Right. Or, unless you're actually trying to do it. But for me, it's the T's, the things should be the things we already use, not new glowing siloed objects that are on, your desk, but they should be the things that we're already used to using.
So like a chair, a desk, a table, a bed,
like
a couch,
yeah,
a
all
TV.
these things, right? And furniture has been really, really reluctant to technological advances. There's not
Why?
a lot.
Because they do make artistic advances. They make design advances.
Sure, design advances, and you can definitely tell. Like there's the mid-century modern is very different from nouveau. Is all these different kinds of, but for some reason our treadmills are much smarter these days than our chairs are, and for some reason it's just very. I think people have a hard time getting over the notion of things not being static and big and structurally sound in a way that technology seems to.
That seems like a very good
subvert.
reason, but I always think there's a good reason and a real reason. And what you just said was a very good reason why it doesn't change in that way. But I think the real reason is that most people historically rise up through, let's say, an art school to design furniture and make a furniture design company are not technologists. And so they get afraid of that. Like, oh no, I don't have that skill that will take years to learn, so they avoid it. But you, fortunately, have that skill and bring it into this design element, and now have set up this furniture company. So I kind of think that's the reason. That sounds more to me. That sounds more like a real reason.
Yeah, I mean, even like this whole sit-stand desk phenomena. Everyone now, it's still not good to stand all day at your desk, right? And people will get uncomfortable and then end up sitting. But if I'm your desk and I'm smart about this and I have all this data and I understand what's happening, I can do things that never let you feel uncomfortable, right? So that you don't actually, by the time you change it, you're already uncomfortable, the damage is done. But I can know before and do things with height changes or positioning and encourage you to change and move around so that you actually don't get hurt.
So realistically, A, what does the kind of home or room of the future look like? And B, how far away are we? Because it seems like the technology is all there.
I think, for the medical, there's some low-hanging fruit medical applications where people who perhaps are, always confined to a bed or a chair where we can make their experience more comfortable, and actually the effects of sitting so long and like that, we could definitely put more sensors in to make those experiences better. For mainstream consumers to have these desks and chairs, I think we're still, 20 years, probably 15 years, maybe. I don't know, maybe 10.
Seems like a long time.
They're going to start. I do. When I said that, I was like, no, I'm not right. I think, we'll start seeing these things, and hopefully I will start making people see these things within the next, 5 years. And for them, to be ubiquitous, I think there's also, massive changes in urbanization now. Urbanization is on an exponential rise. This is having an effect on how we live and work, right? And our spaces are getting smaller. We have to accommodate more people. We have to accommodate more experiences. People want more experience, and they're requiring it out of their possessions. And in some ways, static furniture becomes a misappropriation of space, but it also becomes a constraint. And so if you have a cafe, let's say, and the tables could change, positions, and they could slide up the wall and slide back down the wall and come out. And let's say they're being fed data about, traffic patterns that are from consumers. Could say, okay, in the morning, we have really high foot traffic. These tables should be up because we're going to make a lot more money. And, at 4 o'clock, though, it's really low. We need people to stay and sit and keep buying stuff. Tables can come down, and they can respond to other data sets to be able to then affect.
You could even, like, if you feel like too many people are crowding the restaurant, the seats, you can even have like the chair lean forward just a little bit, because that demonstrates that people will be more likely to exit, or to finish up.
Right. And, or, maybe at night this might be really indicative of a more, I can't stand that I'm going to use this, but like a disruptive, and I really, really am caveating that word because I use it sparingly, notion of how we use space, right? Our approach to space, which, a cafe might not always have a dedicated space. It might just have a dedicated time that it's that. A space might be like, I'm a cafe from this hour to this hour, and I'm a yoga studio from this hour to this hour.
And I think this is important in our, like right now, everybody kind of stays home and goes online, and their kind of virtual spaces are where they spend time. And I think a lot of stores are dealing with the fact that they are no longer a space that people go to, and kind of figuring out innovative uses for space is a technology or a way of thinking that has to be done.
Right.
So it seems like you're doing that. So now tell me about your Kickstarter. So it's kind of an introduction to your products.
Yeah. So we're doing Kickstarter. It launches on the 28th. And basically, we're selling our new chair, which is a chair that can kind of flatten down with a pull of a string and then unfurls to a ergonomic chair when it's open. And it's lightweight and portable and can be customized.
Why is it portable? It's like light. I can just carry it?
Yeah, you can carry it around.
Like a yoga mat or something?
Well, yeah, not quite like a yoga mat. It doesn't totally roll up. Though the timbre, which is the slatted seat surface, that does. But and you can swap that out, so you can have different designs, different woods, and customize them. And it's it's a new kind of transforming chair.
So again, again, just to kind of like round out like your totally odd career, you went from no astronaut to HR at Comedy Central to managing artist to working for Al Franken to being a roboticist, working for an architect, and somehow I feel like it all merged together to what you're doing now. And now you're an entrepreneur. You're building this company that sells kind of this weird, technologically designed furniture.
Yeah.
So almost like you've been doing a dare of the day. Well, I'm going to just apply to MIT and I'm just going to start a company and sell stuff nobody's ever sold before in history. And I just want to add, it's been a dare of the day that got you back here because I felt so bad about losing your prior podcast and I was afraid to call you. So I did a dare of the day, which is just texting you out of the blue and saying you have to come back on. And that's a scary thing for me to come back on my podcast. So I super appreciate it. Tell me tell everybody where they can find you, your furniture, your Kickstarter, and anything else. And our dare of the day, our dare of the year, is at some point we're going to do stand-up comedy together somewhere.
Yes, we are. Maybe around chatbots, right? Or something.
Yeah, we were talking about chatbots earlier.
We were talking about that. So Rock, Paper, Robot is the name of the company, and we'll be on Kickstarter on February 28th for the Ollie chair, which is a transformable chair.
And if somebody did want to start, if someone were saying to themselves, okay, I really do want to start getting out of my comfort zone more and more, what would be the first way they can start thinking about how they can do a dare of the day?
Maybe I should just give like a gateway dare.
Give me a gateway dare. I'm going to do it.
Okay. Pour some coffee on your shirt and just go out in the world.
That's a great one. I'm going to, and wait.
Ketchup, coffee, you can do whatever,
What if you can you take it up a notch? Like you have to go to something important. Because if I'm just walking down, if I'm just getting my newspaper.
This is a gateway one, right? We don't want to got to start with something just go out the door and walk down the street. Know that you just don't,
All right, that's number one. But I want people to tweet me 9 more. I want a dare of the day every day. And I'm going to start doing it. So thanks, Jessica Banks from Rock, Paper, Robot, which is your comma right now until your next one.
My current comma,
your current comma.
Yeah.
And thanks so much for coming, for doing a repeat podcast with me.
I'm so glad that I did. This has been really fun.
Thanks.
I missed you.
Excellent. Me too.
For more from James, check out The James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Hey, thanks for listening. Listen, I have a big favor to ask you, and it will only take 30 seconds or less, and it would mean a huge amount to me. If you like this podcast, please let me know. Please let the team I work with know. Please let my guests know, and you can do this easily by subscribing to the podcast. It's probably the biggest favor you could do for me right now, and it's really simple. Just go to iTunes, search for The James Altucher Show, and click subscribe. Again, it will only take you 30 seconds or less, and if you subscribe now, it will really help me out a lot. Thanks again.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, We believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.